This is the last session of Masechet Yevamot, and it's a pleasure that you've been learning with us this whole time. And we've had the pleasure of learning with Rabbi Silber these past several weeks as we review Mishnah Yomit as part of the Daf Yomi cycle. Today we have something special. Today's class is going to be going a bit extra. We have 1 hour more of reviewing of Yevamot with Rabbi Silber. But in addition, because Torah never really stops, especially when you're on a Yomi cycle, we are going to start Ketubot. So starting at 2 p.m., Rabbanit Leah Sarna will be joining us and giving an introduction on Masechet Ketubot. For those if you're not familiar with any of our teachers, we are starting with Yevamot, is Rabbi David Silber of Drisha for many, many years. For those of you who are not familiar with Rabbanit Leah Sarna, she is the director of teen programs at Drisha and was previously the director of religious engagement at Anshe Shalom Bnei Israel in Chicago. Has smicha from Maharat in 2028, and has been published in The Atlantic, The Washington Post, Lyra House, and other educational settings. Sources for today's class will be a source sheet that I will put for Rabbanit Leah Sarna that I will post when the time comes. Rabbi Silber will be teaching from Yevamot. You are welcome to follow along with your own set of mishnayot. I will be sharing on the screen from Svaria. And just one bit of housekeeping, I'm going to be sending around invitations to panelists. I strongly recommend that you accept them. It means you can ask questions directly, unmute yourself, turn on your camera, which makes for a nice Beit Midrash environment when we can see your face. You will not have to teach the class if you do this, but it does make for a nice environment. However, if you're going to be a panelist, please keep yourself muted unless you are not actively talking, because otherwise we will hear all the background noise going on around you. And with that, I want to turn things over to Rabbi Silber.
Thank you very much. Today is sort of an extra class, and what I thought would make some sense would be to sort of review what we have seen, what you have seen in Masechet Yevamot, sort of an overview of the tractate, to the degree it's possible in the time that we have, and then conclude with the last several mishnayot of Masechet Yevamot. Yevamot is a long tractate. It's the first tractate in Seder Nashim, and we all know that the order of the tractates has to do with the size order. So it means Yevamot is the longest tractate in this Seder we call Nashim. The next one, Ketubot, which Rabbanit Sarna will be leading, that's the second longest. In any event, what is Yevamot about? The answer is many things, but let's focus on the main things and what we've seen over time. The second Yevamot, for starters, is about Yibum, levirate marriage. And we know what levirate marriage is. A man dies, Torah says in the 25th chapter of Devarim, a man dies without children. And so his wife, called Yevamah, is supposed to marry his brother, if he has a brother. There's no brother, there's nothing to talk about. With the death of the husband, she's free to marry anybody she wants. But if there is a brother, then she's supposed to marry the brother. That's called Yibum. The Torah talks about, and the Torah presumes that to be true, but the Torah talks about a situation where the man in the Chumash refuses to marry her. She goes up someplace to the Zikanim, and we saw the mishnayot last week about Chalitza, which is a whole chapter 12 in Masechet Yevamot. And she goes and she says, he doesn't want to marry me. In the Torah, they speak to him. It doesn't say what they say to him. It sounds like they try to convince him to marry her. In any event, he refuses. Then there's this ritual called chalitza, taking off the shoe, untying and taking off his shoe, spits before him. She says certain things, he says certain things. And the Mishnah in the whole chapter we did last week talks about the ritual and adds many details. Mishnah takes something in the Chumash and tries to make it into a ritual, as it were, and it deals with different issues. What is the main piece of the ritual? What is secondary, etc. That's called chalitza. So in the Chumash, it's clear chalitza is not approved of in the Chumash. Over time, in the Gemara, etc., it becomes more of a live option. Eventually, it becomes the primary option. But in any event, that's yibum and chalitza. What I wanted to point out now is something else about chalitza, which we have seen over the course of time, but I want to emphasize what the idea of chalitza is, or how it functions. And that is to say that there's a difference between Yibum and Chalitza. I mean, obviously, there are many differences. One, they're married. The other is they are essentially saying that they're not married anymore and she's free to marry somebody else. Chalitza, as we all know, is the only way to free the Yevamah. She's not permitted to marry anybody else if there's a Yavam there, unless if she marries him, she's married him. If she doesn't want to marry him, he doesn't want to marry her, the only way to free her up, as the Mishnah understands it, apart from the death of the Yavam, would be Chalitza. So that's because there's a relationship that already exists between the Yevama and his brother. And that relationship is called Zika. That's a very important term, for one of the key terms of the tractate. There's already a kind of quasi-marriage state between them. So there's either Yibum or Chalitza. But what about situations where you can't do Yibum? You can't do Yibum, okay? And the Mishnah has certain cases where you can't do Yibum. Let me direct our attention to a Mishnah that we've seen before, which is a Mishnah in chapter 2, Mishnah number 3 and 4. Let's see. Chapter 2, Mishnah number, let me find this Mishnah. Chapter 2, Mishnah, let me find it. Let's find chapter 2, Mishnah.
Debbie, I see you have a hand up. You need to unmute yourself.
I just want to check that I understood this correctly. From what I understand, even divorce doesn't break the Zika connection.
It's a whole chapter. We'll discuss that. We had discussed that in the past. Divorce does not work for a Yavam. Now, I'll get to in a short review. I'll get to divorce that we get. Again, doesn't work to sever the relationship.
Right.
Again, does work for something else. Again, prevents Yibum from taking place, but it doesn't actually preclude Chalitza. You still need Chalitza to free the woman. Okay. The point is that the Mishnah, there are two mishnayot in chapter 2. The Mishnah talks about, says, I'll start with Mishnah 3, even Mishnah 3. Klal Amru b'Yavama. Klal Amru. There's a general principle. When it says Klal Amru, that's very important. There's a general principle when it comes to Yavama. Chol shu iser erva lo choletzet lo mityabemet. In other words, if the woman is an iser erva to the Yavam, that is to say, let's say, for example, she's his let's say his brother married the Yavam's daughter. You're permitted to marry your niece. So he married his niece, and now he dies. So they have no children. So she should marry the Yavam. But the problem is that the Yavam is actually his brother. So he can't. So the brother is not allowed to marry his sister. So therefore, in that case, there is no Yibum, there's no Chalitza, nothing happens. She can marry anybody else. Nothing. There's no reason. There's no need for Yibum is forbidden, and therefore Chalitza is also not relevant. She marries anybody she wants. That's called Arayo. That's Isra Erva. The Mishnah continues, however, says the Mishnah, if a situation is Isra mitzvah, Isra kedusha, choletzet lo mityabemet. Fine. That is very important. And the next Mishnah will explain what is Isra mitzvah and Isra kedusha. We saw this already. I'm just reviewing it. So Isra mitzvah and Isra kedusha is interesting. Isra mitzvah, the next Mishnah, Mishnah 4 says, is what they call mishnayot. We'll get back to this. It's the theme in the tractate. Mishnayot means a forbidden relation. Mishnayot means secondary. Sheni is second. So the point is, Isra Shniya is a relationship which, from the Torah, it's not on the list of forbidden relationships. It's permissible. But the rabbis added additional relationships that are forbidden, rabbinically forbidden. That's called an Isra Shniya. There are 20 of them. Secondary relationships. So in that case, so let's say the man, the Yavama, the woman, is related secondarily to the Yavam. So in that case, the Mishnah says, in that case, you can't do Yibum because it's forbidden secondarily. There's a forbidden relationship. But since from the Torah, since from the Torah, there is no prohibition. From the Torah's standpoint, she's permitted to marry the Yavam. From the rabbinic standpoint, she's not allowed to marry the Yavam. So what happens in that case? So in that case, you can't do Yibum, but you have to do Chalitza. She can't marry anybody else, because from the Torah standpoint, she's still connected to the Yavam. There's still Zika. So in this case, you do Chalitza. And that's the way the Mishnah explains in Mishnah number 4, Isser Mitzvah, Shniyot Midivrei Sofrim. Isser Kedusha is a different situation. Isser Kedusha is, let's say she married a Kohen. His brother is the Kohen Gadol. Yichus, she's his brother. Her brother-in-law is the Kohen Gadol, and now her husband dies. But the Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry a widow. Or let's say, for example, she's a divorced woman, and now she remarried, and the husband dies, and the Yavam is a Kohen. She's not allowed to marry the Kohen either. But this is very interesting. So in this case, she's not allowed to marry the Yavam because it's from the Torah forbidden to marry her. But, and this is a critical point, even though it's forbidden to marry her, Kohen can't marry a Grusha. But if they did get married, they are married. They're not supposed to stay married, whatever. That's a different problem. But they are actually married. There's a difference between an Isser Kedusha and an Isser Erva. The list in the Chumash of Arayot, which typically come with the punishment of karet or death, capital crime, the marriage is a non-marriage. There's no relationship. There's no ishut. So there's no zika either. But in this case over here, even though it's forbidden, they can't live together. But they still have a relationship. So the only way to break the relationship is through chalitza. Now, the point I wanted to make here, and I'll just stop the comments or questions, the point I wanted to make about chalitza is that chalitza has another very important function, because chalitza is present in all cases where there's a problem with yibum because of some possible prohibition. It's prohibited to sleep together. It's never prohibited to take off somebody's shoe. So therefore, chalitza functions in these cases where there is some kind of relationship. There is zika. But on the other hand, there's the prohibition of yibum. But the fact that you can't do yibum in these cases doesn't mean you can't do chalitza. If it's a relationship that is arayot, there's no yibum and there's no chalitza. There's no relationship because there's no marriage there. There can't be marriage there. State of marriage they can live together for 100 years, but they're not, technically speaking, married to each other. There's no ishut. But in the case of Kohen Gadol to an Almana, Kohen to a Grusha, other Isurim perhaps as well, that are forbidden, but are not arayot, there you would require chalitza. You can always do chalitza in those cases. And the Mishnah has other cases as well. For example, let's see if I can find another Mishnah which talks about, let me see, another Mishnah, chapter 3, Mishnah 8. Chapter 3, Mishnah number 8.
All right.
Chapter 3, Mishnah 8. Everybody sees that? Everybody, chapter 3, Mishnah 8. It says, V'chulan, this one, wait a second. V'chulan shahayu behen kedushin or gerushin b'safek harei elu tzarot chotzot v'lo mityamot. You have a situation. In other words, the first Mishnah in the tractate, right? The very first Mishnah talked about those cases which there can't be yibum. Let's say the woman is for the case I gave. A man marries his niece, and he dies without children, so she can't do yibum and no chalitza either. But, and this is important, this is how the tractate began, you remember. What about if the man has more than one wife? In the Mishnah, the man can have many wives. A man having only one wife is much later, Rabbi Gershom. But the Mishnah, many cases in Yevamot and complicated ones, the man has multiple wives. Those are the cases of all these different cases. So this guy has two wives. One of his wives is his niece, is his niece, his brother's daughter. He dies without children. So that woman, the niece, can't do yibum because the yibum would be with her father, and that's forbidden. But the man has another wife who's unrelated to anybody. He's married to Rachel, he's married to Dina. Dina's not related. What about Dina? Can Dina do yibum? You can do yibum with any one of the women. So it's only one per brother, but you can do a different one. So the first Mishnah says in Yevamot, no. If there's no yibum for the niece, then there's no yibum for the other wife either. The other wife is called the tzara. It comes up throughout the Masechet. If you've gone through the Masechet, you've come across the term tzara many times. But what about the following situation? What about a situation where he marries his niece? But then, if he divorces his niece, if he divorced the niece at the time of his death, he wasn't married to the niece, then the other woman would do yibum. But what about a situation where we're not sure if he's divorced or not? Or we're not sure about the marriage? That's called the suffix, a doubt. So in the case of suffix is a topic, by the way, that Gemara is consumed with. All the Mishnah and the Gemara, it's a major, major, major topic. What do you do in cases of doubt for the suffix? There's a world about suffix. It's very interesting. But again, we're just touching upon these things here. So in the case of suffix, the woman, we're not sure if this woman was actually married or not at the time of the death of the brother, of the husband. So the brother cannot do yibum in that case because it's a suffix, it's a doraita. When you have the suffix about a Torah prohibition, we take the stringent view. So he wouldn't be able to do yibum with he certainly can't do yibum with his daughter. But maybe the daughter wasn't married to the guy at all. What about the other woman? So in this case, the other woman is not related. So in this case, he can't do yibum because it's a suffix, because maybe she's actually forbidden to him. Forbidden as his brother's wife. Remember, we spoke about this a lot. Yibum, by its nature, by the very case of yibum itself, the kosher case of yibum, is essentially incest, because you're marrying your brother's wife. Your brother's wife, your sister-in-law, is forbidden to you. Forbidden, right? So when she's married, she's forbidden. But what about if we're not sure if she were ever married in the first place? So in this case, misafik, he can't marry the other woman. On the other hand, maybe he can. So this is a case where you do chalitza, chotzot below mityabot. So again, this is a different situation of chalitza. Chalitza helps us out in two different cases. One is it is required in situations where the marriage is forbidden, to forbidden marriage, but the marriage would be a fact of marriage, a kohen to a kerusha, an issa lav as opposed to an issa karet. So in that case, you need chalitza. Chalitza works. This is another example where chalitza works in case of a suffix. Because remember, chalitza per se is just a ritual. Take you off a shoe, spitting, take you off a shoe. There's no aveira connected with chalitza. Let's say you don't need the chalitza. Okay, you took off the guy's shoe. So what? But that's not the case of yibum. You're actually living together. That would be forbidden. I want just to make that point clear about chalitza, the other function of chalitza that runs through the whole Masechet. In many cases, we say choletzet b'lo mityabemet. I gave you two examples over here, two different mishnayot. Let me stop here for a moment. Are there any comments or questions so far?
Yeah. I'm sorry I have so many questions, but...
What are you sorry about? No, the contrary. Go ahead.
I thought it said that if you can't do chalitza, you can't do yibum. Didn't it say that somewhere also? Eino chaletzet, eino mityabemet? Right.
There are cases where you do neither. The first Mishnah. In the first Mishnah, a man marries his niece. He dies. In that case, there is no yibum and there's no chalitza.
Because it's from the Torah, because it's Arab.
Right, because there's no marriage, because it's a forbidden marriage from the Torah, apart from the fact that it's always a forbidden marriage. It's your sister-in-law. But that
no, but this is on a higher level.
Right. This is a different prohibition. The Torah only lifted the prohibition of sister-in-law, as the Mishnah understands it. It doesn't lift the prohibition of, say, daughter. But the chiddush of the first Mishnah is, the Mishnah's great chiddush. It's a chiddush. We never would have said such a thing. Is that in this case, not only can the daughter not do yibum, but the other woman also. The man has 4 other wives. None of them are related to the brother. What's wrong with that? Well, why can't you do even one of the other ones? No. The Mishnah presumes that if the woman is petura from yibum and chalitza, then the tzara is also
all of them.
That's how all of them, and that's the first Mishnah. That's a great chiddush. That's how the tractate actually starts. And the truth is, and the word tzara comes up not just in the beginning of the tractate. It comes up later on in another context. Since you mentioned it, I'll mention where else it comes up. It comes up for example, comes up several places. I'll mention one of them. Comes up in terms of aguna. Now, aguna is the three chapters in this tractate that deal with aguna. Towards the end, all towards the end. The last 2 chapters and the chapter before that is chapter 10 or 11. 3 different chapters. So in aguna, I wanted to conclude with it before 2 o'clock, but in aguna, the Mishnah has a very interesting view about aguna. I wanted to talk about that. The Jewish tradition, clearly with the Gemara for sure, and it's coming out of the Mishnah, finds all kinds of leniencies to permit women to remarry. Because generally speaking, marriage is a serious matter, and you would need 2 witnesses. At a wedding, you have 2 witnesses. But when it comes to saying that a man died to permit the woman to remarry, we allow 1 witness. You don't need 2. And not only that, the Mishnah, according to one view, allows all kinds of people who, generally speaking, wouldn't be acceptable to testify altogether, including a non-Jew. A non-Jew, someone apostle, etc. Under certain circumstances, we accept their testimony. Hearsay evidence, all this stuff is accepted. And everybody's believed, men, women, doesn't matter who it is, except there are 5 cases where you don't accept the testimony. And one of them is from a tzara. Tzara is what there are 5 women whose testimony is not acceptable because we are concerned. I know it must sound crazy to you, but we're concerned that she's going to say the husband died, even though he's very much alive, to cause this woman to then remarry. And if she marries somebody else and the husband comes back, that's a different set of mishnayot that we saw, where there are all kinds of terrible penalties. She loses the ketubot, she loses everything under the sun. If she had a baby, the baby's a mamzer, the works. And she can never go back to the first guy. So maybe the tzara wants the presumption that the tzara might have something against her, right? And to do with a terrible thing. So we don't
conflict of interest.
Yes, conflict of interest. There are 5 such women that even though we accept virtually anybody to testify for the aguna that the husband died, but the tzara is one of those. So the tzara comes out through the Masechta. That's my point. In any event, that's the first Mishnah. Okay, so that we saw. I want to add that point about chalitza. Now I want to make a different point related to what someone mentioned before. I think it was Debbie told before, and that is the following. As far as the Torah, as the Mishnah understands it, I'm just reviewing some of the stuff that we did. As far as the Mishnah understands it, a man dies without children. There are only 2 options. One option, if he has a brother, there are 2 options. One is yibum, and one is chalitza. What is yibum? Yibum means they get together, they sleep together. That's yibum. That's yibum. The Mishnah does not know of any other way to do yibum except, from the Torah, either they live together or they chalitza. Those are the 2 options. The Mishnah, though, introduces a new concept. This is not in the Torah at all. Totally new concept called ma'amar. Mem aleph mem reish. This comes up in many of the mishnayot in Masechet Yevamot, especially in the 5th chapter. What does ma'amar mean? So ma'amar, chapter 5, Mishnah 1. Ma'amar is basically kedushin. That is to say, the first Mishnah in Masechet Kedushin says that a woman can be acquired in three ways: with money, with a shtar, with a contract, or with or sexual intercourse, basically. Yebia. That's what the Mishnah says. The Gemara says, Rav Man Giraman to Mekadesh Babia. Rav gave Malkot, means Rav gave Malkot to anybody who didn't do Kedushin first, before they're actually living together. He insisted that they have either kesef or shtar. The common practice in Israel is kesef, basically. Rav Man Giraman to Mekadesh Babia. When it comes to Yibum, however, that says the Mishnah, even though from the Torah, it doesn't speak about Kedushin at all. There's no Kedushin. But the rabbis insisted on Kedushin. The rabbis insisted that you should do Ma'amar before you actually live together. The rabbis were unhappy with just people just living together. The rabbis thought it's called Kedushin. That's not the sanctified way to go about things. So they required Kedushin first. And Kedushin, in the case of Yibum, is called Ma'amar. The mishnayot in the fifth perek, those are a series of bit complicated mishnayot. So once, let's say there are more than one brother. Let's say there's several brothers. The Mishnah said earlier that the oldest brother is the one who's initially responsible to do Yibum. If he won't do it or someone else intervened and did it, it's done. But the older brother is the one who should do Yibum, fine. But what about if a different brother did Ma'amar? The older brother is supposed to do Yibum, but the other brother did Ma'amar. So then the question is, what happens in such a case? Can a different brother then do Yibum or not? It sounds like not. But once you did, let's say the guy did Ma'amar and then he changed his mind. So if he did Ma'amar and changed his mind, then this Yevamot would require two things. She requires a get in that case. Because Chalitza doesn't work for normal marriage. It only works for Yibum. But in this case, he did Kedushin of a sort. It's not real Kedushin, quasi-Kedushin, let's call it. So in this particular case, you would need a get plus Chalitza. So this is the concept called Ma'amar. It has all kinds of other implications. Does it disqualify anybody else? It requires a get, etc. And the Mishnah in the fifth parak dealt with different kinds of situations. So that's a rabbinic institution called Ma'amar. That's according to Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai thought that Ma'amar actually is not just rabbinic. Beit Shammai apparently thought in one of the mishnayot that it's real kedushin, not just rabbinically kedushin, but actually is real kedushin from the Torah. That was the view of Beit Shammai. But Beit Hillel, whose position we typically follow, though not always, he felt that Ma'amar is just a rabbinic invention. Fine. That's the second point I wanted to make about the overview. Now I want to mention something else that we did not discuss yet. I wanted to mention this because I didn't think we can't go through the whole tractate without pointing this out. And that is, I mentioned Ma'amar as a rabbinic invention, a rabbinic kind of a rabbinic kedushin in the case of where Yibum is called for. The Mishnah, though, in Tractate Yevamot, in two different chapters, talks about a different situation of kedushin to Rabbanit. In other words, there are situations where the couple is married, not from the Torah, but the rabbis instituted kind of rabbinic marriage. I want to mention two, and they're found in two different chapters in this tractate. Two different chapters. One is found in chapter 13, and one I believe is chapter 14. So one of them is that the rabbis said that someone who was the cheresh can get married. It will be chapter 14, I believe, is the one we want. Chapter 14. Is it chapter 14? Let's see. I think it's 14.
It's 14.
Yeah, chapter 14, right? It's at the beginning of 14, right? Yeah, chapter 14, Mishnah 1. Fine. So a cheresh is the following. Cheresh means a person who's deaf. In the Talmud, first, a person cheresh means someone who neither hears nor speaks,
but has basic intelligence. But is
right,
intelligent.
The presumption of the Mishnah this is very interesting because we know nowadays some people who are deaf are quite adept. But in those days, a cheresh is someone who neither hears nor speaks, is presumed to not have enough da'at, enough knowledge or intelligence to effect certain things, to effect certain kinds of transactions. One of them would be marriage. So cheresh then, it's a cheresh or a chareshet, man or woman, could never affect the marriage because they don't have the mental capability to create a marriage. There's a lot of interesting, in the last many years, all kinds of discussions whether this would apply nowadays, and many of the poskim say this is no application anymore, given what we know that cheresh can often be trained. They can be totally functional, actually. But in any event, this is what you have. In many of the mishnayot in Shas, cheresh, shota, v'katan, those three often come together. All three, shota means either someone probably is mentally disabled in some way. Cheresh would be someone who can neither hear nor speak, and a katan is a minor. Those three come together in many mishnayot. Cheresh, shota, v'katan. They don't have enough da'at to affect transactions, sales, marriage, etc. That's true from the Torah. But rabbinically, the rabbi said that a cheresh can get married, and the marriage of the cheresh is valid, but rabbinically valid. So that's an interesting called a takada of the rabbis. They felt people shouldn't be alone, cheresh, chareshet, so they can get married. But their marriage only has a rabbinic status. And therefore, it comes up in Tractate Yevamot in cases, for example, where let's say a man had married two wives. One of them is chareshet, and one of them is or a cheresh married two women. In that case, and he dies without children, etc. So in those cases, and one of the wives is chareshet, but the other one is not, called the pikachat. So in those kind of cases, you'll have an issue about yibum, because the yibum or chalitza for the chareshet is not actually binding for the other one, because from the Torah's viewpoint, she's not married in the first place. So what do you do in those kinds of cases? That's what the Mishnah talks about. But the important point is that the rabbis actually created the possibility of being married on a rabbinic level in the case of cheresh. That's one situation where we have a rabbinic marriage. But then we have another kind of rabbinic marriage, which is actually even more interesting. And that's the subject of the 13th chapter. If we take a look at the 13th chapter, Mishnah number 1, I thought we have to look at this Mishnah before we complete the tractate. The chapter 13, Mishnah 1. We have a dispute of Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai omrim, ein memanim ela arusot. Ubeit Hillel omrim, arusot unesuot. We have a concept called mi'un, mem yud aleph vav nun, a very important concept. What is mi'un? The word mi'un means refusal. To refuse, by ma'ain, to refuse. So it's like this. What is the status of a katana? A girl who has not reached majority yet. 6-year-old, the 4-year-old, the 2-year-old, whatever. I know this is not, doesn't reflect necessarily our sensibilities. According to the Torah, a man can marry his daughter without her consent if she's a katana. The Gemara does say in Masechet Kedushin that he is forbidden to do so. That is true. The Gemara says it's also it shouldn't do it. It's also. But if he did it, she's married. Fine. Now let's say that the father can marry his daughter. No consent. Till she's 12 and a half years old. She's a katana, even when she's a nara. Fine. Now what's the situation? Fine. Well, let's say she has no father. She's an orphan. And she's 7 years old. Can she get married? So the Mishnah says that she may get married. Who's going to marry her off? Her mother, her brother, her relatives. They can marry this girl off to somebody. But the difference is that in this particular case, when she has Kedushay Miyun, she has kedusha, which is subject to miyun. When she reaches 12 years old, she's a nara. Then she is halachically considered a gedola. She's not a katana anymore. She can refuse to stay married to this guy. In which case, she was never married in the first place. Now, she may have met this guy when she's 2 years old, and they're living as husband and wife, whatever that means, for 10 years. And then 12 years, when she's 12 years old, she can say, I'm not really interested. And then she goes free without a get. There's not only not a get, she can marry a Kohen after. She was never considered married. And that, as long as she says, I don't want to marry him, that's called mi'un. So the first Mishnah, so there you have an institution of marriage, which is certainly rabbinic. That is, the mother and the brother can marry her off. But this marriage is on a lower level than a normal marriage, in the sense, this can be terminated without anything, just on her say-so. And the Gemara discusses how much say-so, what does she have to do? There are all kinds of discussions about this. But in terms of the strict halacha, if she says, I'm not interested, turns out retroactively they were never married. There is a disagreement in chapter 13 about under what circumstances is there miyun. The Beit Shammai had a different position. Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel come up in several places in Masechet Yevamot, the very first Mishnah. Here again, Beit Shammai omrim a memanin ela arusot. Beit Shammai says the woman can only do miyun if she is an arusa. What does an arusa mean? Arusa means they're married. They had a wedding, but they never lived together. In the times of the Talmud, times of the Gemara, they would have kedushin at one point in time, and a year later they would have nisuin. They'd live together a year later. During that year, she's married. She needs a get, but they're not. But for certain purposes, they're not married. So that's called the nara hamurasa, right? So Beit Shammai says if this girl, if the brother or the mother married her off to some guy, they haven't actually lived in the same place yet, they're separate, then she can do miyun. But once they're actually married, according to Beit Shammai, they're married. And you can't just say, I don't want to be married anymore. You would require a get in that circumstance. Well, Beit Hillel says no. Arusot unasuot. It doesn't matter. Even if they're living together, she can simply terminate at any point. Beit Shammai omrim babao v'lo b'yavam. Beit Shammai says there's only miyun with the husband. But if the husband died without children and now she's connected to the yavam, there's no more miyun. Too late. Presumably, according to Beit Shammai, the status of that, the issue that exists in yavam, there's no din of miyun anymore. Beit Hillel omrim babao uva yavam. What's the difference, says Beit Hillel? There was whatever relationship there was with the first guy continues with the second guy. Maybe they disagree about the question we raised several times, whether the relationship with the Yavam is simply an extension of the one to the Baal, or it's a new setting. Maybe Beit Hillel says, what's the difference? She could do me in with the first husband. The Yavam is just an extension of the first guy. And Beit Shammai maybe thinks, no, this is different. It's a different relationship. It doesn't lend itself to be. Beit Shammai Beit Shammai says if she does a miyum, it's only in his presence. I don't want to be married to you. Beit Hillel no, she can do it not in his presence. She can go to a friend and make a pronouncement. I'm not married to. I don't like this guy anymore. Beit Shammai only in court. It's a ritual, only in court. Beit Hillel no, you don't have to go to court. Any place is good. Beit Hillel Beit Shammai katana. Beit Hillel says to Beit Shammai, she can do. Let's say she said they married her off to Avram. She's 7 years old. She says when she's 8 years old, I don't like Avram. According to Beit Hillel, it's over. Then apparently her brother or mother can marry her to somebody else, to Shimon. Well, she's not like Shimon either. Even 4 or 5 different times. Beit Hillel says she can always destroy or undo, I would say, undo the marriage. Armoren Beit Shammai ein b'not Yisrael hefker. Utamayin v'tinase. Rabbi Hill says no. What is this? Revolving door or something? The daughters of Israel, they're not hefker. No, you have to. She can only be ma'anet when she not when she's a katana. When she turns 12 years in one day, she can do miyun and marry somebody else. This is actually an interesting machloket b'shan Beit Hillel about miyun, and also seems to be a machloket about the nature of marriage in general. Beit Shammai is saying, no, marriage is something you can't just get rid of it. Okay, it's not 100% marriage, but even miyun is a quasi-marriage. And Beit Hillel says miyun is not marriage altogether. Miyun was an arrangement. You don't want this girl to be alone or whatever it is. And of course, in those days, they got married very young. It's completely not now, but they're doing it presumably to protect the girl, whatever. Maybe it's financially valid. Who knows the reason? So this is called miyun, and this is a different kind of kedushin. This is a kedushin drabanan, where the mother or the brother married her off, but it's not the same as the cheresh, which was a rabbinic institution. Because in the case of cheresh, it's actually rabbinically, it's a real marriage. But in the case of the mother or the brother marrying her off, it's not really, according to Beit Hillel, it's a kind of arrangement. But it's not a real marriage. And the proof of the pudding is that if she can simply say, I'm not interested, but that undoes it retroactively. She was never married, so she can marry a Kohen, etc. Okay, I want to mention this is, I think, important for our overview of the Masechta. And now I want to spend the last 15 or 20 minutes. See, Rabbanit Sarna has joined us, who's going to be leading the study of Ketubot. I wanted to jump to the very end of the Masechta. There's a couple of mishnayot that are actually very important. Everybody should know this. It's very important. And very important to know this. Again, as I mentioned before, the story of the aguna. Now, the aguna in the Gemara is not today what we call aguna, other conversation, but the aguna in the Mishnah is a woman who's married, and the husband may have died. So if he died, death, of course, frees her up to marry somebody else. That's what lies behind the Yevamot situation. In that case, where there's a brother, and she's connected to the brother. In the absence of a brother, she marries anybody that she wants. But if there's a brother, there's that relationship that exists, that zika that exists, which forbids of her marrying anybody else. She requires chalitza. She doesn't want to go through with the marriage. But what that means is that the way the Mishnah understands it, and that's why the laws of Pru or Peri of Arivia are also Masechet Yevamot. That getting married, having children, from the Mishnah standpoint, is actually a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. So we want to encourage that mitzvah, and we want to help this woman. So therefore, they came up with this position in one position in the Mishnah is that anybody is believed to say that the husband died. Having said that, what's interesting about the 3 chapters that deal with the aguna in the world of aguna is that on the other hand, there are stringencies. One of the stringencies we saw in our study, namely, that in the case that she was permitted to remarry, one witness came, even 2 witnesses came according to one view, and the court said, go out and get married. And then it turns out the husband walks in 2 weeks later, he's alive. That in that situation, the Mishnah said earlier, we discussed this already, there are all kinds of penalties placed upon the woman. I presume the reason for that is they want to emphasize how serious a matter this is. Nonetheless, according to one view, which is the accepted view, we do accept any witness, anybody who can testify that the husband has died. Having said all that, I want to draw our attention to chapter 16, to the last 3 mishnayot of Tractate Yevamot. This is actually a very important Mishnah. Chapter 16, Mishnah number 4. This is everybody should all be familiar with this concept. The Mishnah says, "Nafal lamayim bein sheyesh lehem sof, bein she'en lehem sof, ishto asura." If a man fell into water, literally, which has no end or has an end, what that means is you can't see where the water ends. In other words, you look at a body of water, can you see all the way to the other side? If you can't see to the other side, it's called mayim she'ein lahem sof. According to the Mishnah, it says the man fell into this body of water, so he might have drowned, probably drowned. Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir holds. Rabbi Meir says, "Maaseh bi'echad shenafa lebar gadol, v'yala li'achar shlosha yamim." Rabbi Meir says, "I know a case where a guy fell into this deep pit, and had a lot of water in it. Normally, a bar has water. The pit of Joseph had no water. A bar and bomayim, but normally a pit has water. So he fell into this deep pit. Everybody thought he died. 3 days later, there he is. That's the Gemara understands this Mishnah. Rabbi Meir is the author of the first part of the Mishnah. Rabbi Meir says it doesn't matter if yesh lahem sof or ein lahem sof. A pit, yesh lo sof, you can see where the pit is. We see anybody come out of it. Nonetheless, as Rabbi Meir, if he fell into it, he came out after 3 days. In other words, someone who would testify, I saw Reuven fall into this pit. According to Rabbi Meir, that would not be sufficient testimony to allow her to remarry. That's Rabbi Meir's opinion. Amar Rabbi Yossi, Maaseh b'suma sheyarad l'tbol b'mara, v'yarad moshcho acharav, v'shahu kadesha teitei nafsham, v'hisiyu nishoteyim. Rabbi Yossi disagrees with Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yossi seems to say, if it's a mayim sheyesh himself, they're fighting in the Mishnah about mayim sheyesh himself. Rabbi Meir is machmir. Meir says it doesn't matter. That's insufficient testimony to permit the woman to remarry. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. Rabbi Yossi says, no, I'll tell you a story. They went down to a well, they went down to a pit, it's filled with water. They waited for a while, and people could normally come out, and they permitted the people that were down there, they permitted their wives to remarry. Okay. The point is, this is called mayim she'ein lahem sof. You should all be aware of this phrase. Mayim she'ein lahem. Of course, in the Mishnah, the only dispute in the Mishnah is about mayim sheyesh lahem sof. So we, generally speaking, don't follow Rabbi Meir's opinion. When Rabbi Meir is mentioned by name in the Mishnah, we don't follow his opinion. If the Mishnah is a stam Mishnah with no name, and the Gemara presumes that many stam mishnayot Rabbi Meir is the author of it, we actually do follow his opinion. When he's mentioned by name, we don't follow his opinion. That's an interesting point. But anyway, but mayim she'ein lahem sof, you can't see the end of it. You can't assume that the person did not get out of the water, which is actually, you think about it, very strange. You see this gigantic body of water. If someone falls in, you're going to assume the person somehow got out. I mean, what are the chances? Falls into the Atlantic Ocean. Mayim she'ein lahem sof. So what's curious about it is that on one hand, you have these unbelievable leniencies which seem to violate every rule of the system in allowing the woman to remarry. And then we have this Mishnah, but mayim she'ein lahem sof, which forbids the woman to remarry under these circumstances. So those that deal with aguna, and trying to find ways to permit the woman to remarry, which is assumed by the poskim to be a great mitzvah, heter agunot, and they do triple somersaults to accomplish it. But this is something that they have to deal with. This particular Mishnah, the situation of mayim she'ein lahem sof. You should just have it on your radar screen. You should know that. That's why I mentioned it here. Fine. Now, let's take a look. We have 10 minutes here. I'll turn over to Rabbanit Leah. Mishnah number 5 said the following. By the way, this chapter deals with another issue, which is also a very interesting issue in terms of modern technology. How do you know that this is the person? The Mishnah earlier, which we're not getting into, how do you identify this is? Nowadays we have DNA testing, so we can 100% know who the person is. But they didn't have that in those days, and they had to resort to other kinds of modes of identification. That the question is to what degree those modes of identification are relevant in today's world is a very important question. Anyway, Mishnah number 5 and 6. So the Mishnah number 5 says that any testimony is good. We can rely upon any testimony to permit the woman to remarry. Even little children talking, we overhear them talking. So-and-so went to, where's so-and-so? Where's your daddy? He went to so-and-so's funeral. That would be sufficient to allow the woman to remarry, etc. Right. Let's look at the last Mishnah. So the last Mishnah, Masechet Yevamot. Mishnah says, Mishnah number 7. Amar Rabbi Akiva. Amar Rabbi Akiva. This is the last Mishnah of the tractate. Amar Rabbi Akiva. Kishiyaradati l'naharda li'aber hashana. The Mishnah has a story. We don't have too many stories in the Mishnah. This is the last Mishnah. There's a story. Rabbi Akiva said, when I went to Narada was a city in Bava. It's a big yeshiva in Narada. I went to Narada la'aber hashana to add to intercalate the year. The halacha is that the intercalation of the year, adding the extra month, is typically done inside the land of Israel by those that are considered the experts. But if you're the expert, you're permitted to do it even outside the land of Israel. Rabbi Akiva was considered the expert. So even though he's outside Israel, he can do the intercalation of the year. He went to Naradoa, and he went there to La'aber Hashana, Shana Muberet. Matzati Nechemia Ish Beit Tuli. He came across a fellow named Nechemia from Beit Tuli. Amarli, Shamati She'ein Masin Eto Isha B'Yeretz Yisrael Al Pi Den Echad. El Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. So I heard, tell me if this is true, that in the land of Israel, the only person who says that a woman can get married with just one witness is Yehuda ben Bava. Is that so? When I said to him, says Rabbi Akiva, came at Dvarim. That's true. In Israel, we don't rely. The majority doesn't rely on one witness. Yehuda ben Bava says one witness is enough, but to remarry, you need 2 witnesses. You always need 2 witnesses. Amalo and Molahem B'Shmi says, when you get back, Rabbi Akiva, tell them in my name. Atem Yodim Shamadina Mishubeshet Begaisot. You know that it's dangerous to travel. That's why I'm not going myself. I'm telling you to tell them in my name. Mukhubrani Rabban Gamliel Hazaken. Shemasin Neto Isha Al Pi Eid Echad. Uchshebati Vertzeti Hadvrim with Rabban Gamliel. Samach with Dvarai V'Yamar. Matzanu Chaver Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. Mitocha Dvarim Niska Rabban Gamliel. Shenergu Harugim Betel Arza. V'hisi Rabban Gamliel Hazaken Nishoteim Al Pi Eid Echad. V'chuchzku liot masiyan al pi eid echad. V'chuchzku liot masiyan eid mipi eid, mipi even, mipi isha, mipi shivcha. So the story is, so Rabbi Akiva is traveling up north there to Babel. He meets this fellow, Nechemia Ish Beit Tuli. I heard that in Israel they don't accept one witness to allow the woman to remarry. That's right. So you tell them in my name. I have a tradition from Rabban Gamliel Hazaken. Who is Rabban Gamliel Hazaken? There are 2 Rabban Gamliels in the Talmud. There's the Rabban Gamliel, the plain Rabban Gamliel, who was the Nasi, who was a contemporary of Rabbi Akiva, a little older than Rabbi Akiva, a contemporary of Rabbi Yoshua. I guess in fights with Rabbi Yoshua in the Talmud in more than one place. He's the head of the Beit Din. He was deposed for a while. That's Rabban Gamliel. His grandfather is also Rabban Gamliel Hazaken. And Rabbi Gamliel Hazaken's grandfather is none other than Hillel. He's Hillel's grandson. So you tell, when you get back, you tell them that I have a tradition that Rabbi Gamliel Hazaken permitted a woman to remarry on the basis of one witness. And not only that, tell him that Rabbi Akiva says, so when I told Rabbi Gamliel this, he said, oh, I was so happy. And then he remembered himself. Rabbi Gamliel remembered that his grandfather had permitted many women to be married, not just one witness, but any witness. not only normally a kosher witness, even a slave, even hearsay, etc. He was happy to hear this because he actually wanted to find ways to permit women to be married. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua Omrim, Rabbi Eliezer, the two heavyweights, Rabbi Akiva's Rebbe's, no, ein masir of isha pi echad. They said no. Rabbi Akiva Omer, lo al pi isha, lo al pi even, lo al pi shivcha, lo al pi krovim. Rabbi Akiva himself said, yes, one witness is sufficient, but only a witness who was normally accepted, not a relative, not a woman, not a shivcha, etc. There are three positions in the Mishnah. There's the position of the Chemi Deituli and Rabbi Gamliel's grandfather. Anybody's good for the Aguna case, anybody. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, two heavyweights say no, you need two witnesses. Rabbi Akiva is the intermediate way. You need one witness is enough, but it has to be a kosher witness, normally kosher witness. Amrulo. So they said to Rabbi Akiva, and you say you need one kosher witness, we'll tell you that it's not true. Because of the following story. There was a story that sons of Levi were traveling together. They went to Tzoar. One of them got sick. They took him to an inn. And they came back and they said to the innkeeper, the woman in charge of the inn, where's our friend? He's dead and I buried him. And they went back and they permitted his wife to remarry. So you see, the Pundaki is not Jewish. You see that anybody, even a non-Jew, can say he's died and we believe her. Amar Lahem, Rabbi Akiva said to them, that is, what he's saying is, the Pundaki herself, do you think she's actually believed? The Sefer Torah Hayabi Adom. No, in that case, we wouldn't believe the Pundakit either. But in that particular case, she brought out, he was carrying with him the Sefer Torah. Look, here's his stuff. I buried him. Here's his coat. Here's his walking stick, Sefer Torah. So in that case, there was other evidence to substantiate her claim. But normally speaking, you need one kosher witness. So here's what's interesting. I just have to stop with this. I want to turn over to Rabbanit Leah, who'll start the next tractate. When you read this Mishnah, you have, on one hand, Rabbi Gamliel, it's Nehemiah Beit Deli, the people talking to Rabbi Akiva. But the last word in this Mishnah belongs to Rabbi Akiva, requires one kosher witness, and his two Rebbes, two of the big people of the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua, they both say one witness is not good for the Aguna, you need two witnesses. So now you get to the Gemara. What does the Gemara do with this? The Gemara presumes, and all who follow the Gemara presume, and all the codifiers, that we don't follow Rabbi Yoshua, we don't follow Rabbi Akiva, we don't follow Rabbi Eliezer, we follow the position of the Amrulo. Because actually, part of it has to do with part of the halakhic thinking. That's a very important point. Is with it, they both of them they were in this last Mishnah Maseh. There's an actual case. In terms of determining halacha, we have a principle that when the Mishnah cites a case, this Mishnah cited two cases. A case is very, very powerful in terms of halakhic thinking. If you have an actual case, you rely upon the case. The Jewish tradition has adopted the view, not of Rabbi Akiva or the others, the view that we are searching as much as possible to permit the Aguna to remarry. And I would say that the important point in terms of Aguna is that actually, and this is the big issue nowadays, because you can think of Aguna in the narrow sense of the Mishnah. The woman we don't know if the husband died or not. But the truth of the matter is that if you think of Aguna much more broadly and much more correctly, it's any woman who's stuck in a situation that she can't escape from. Husband doesn't want to give her a get. There are all kinds of situations like that. It's clear that the Jewish tradition is 1,000% breaking all kinds of normal rules to allow the woman to remarry. And I think what comes out of the Mishnah, couldn't be more clear. So the truth is that the poskim over time, as I said, did triple somersaults to find ways to permit women to remarry after the Shoah, cases, World Trade Center, all that stuff. And I think a correct view would see this as a mandate to try to find Hatarat Agunot for similar situations. Anyway, thank you. This was just a review of the Masechta. There's a lot more here. But again, to touch upon the basics of Masechet Yevamot, which is the longest tractate in Seder Nashim. And again, one can go back and study it many times, but the main point of all this is, and the study of the Mishnah in general, it's a gateway to Torah Sheba'al Peh. And a lot of these issues that are raised in the Mishnah and the concepts of the Mishnah are carried forth by the Gemara and the later commentaries on the Talmud and the codifiers, Shulchan Aruch, the Rambam, etc., up to modern times. This is a good way to begin our immersion in Torah Sheba'al Peh. Thank you all for participating, and I'll turn it over to Rabbanit Leah.
All right, thank you. I'm just going to post sources for Rabbanit Leah's portion in chat and hand things over to her.
Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to begin the learning of Masechet Ketubot together. I just want to say a little bit about why I love Mishnah study in general. I started learning mishnayot at a very young age, probably even too young of an age, because we had social issues in where I grew up on Shabbat afternoons, girls being excluded, blah, 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 and a dad in the show was a dad of one of my friends was like, forget this. We're not dealing with this. Everyone's learning Mishnah together. And that's what we did Shabbat afternoons, starting in second grade, I think. We learned mishnayot as a way of resolving the social girl issues. And and then I came back to Mishnah and really learned all of it in order. Starting right after finishing my year in yeshiva, so through college. And then all I had left was Taros to get through. And that took me 3 years, not at a Mishnah Yomit pace. And then I actually made a siyum on Shas Mishnayot at my wedding. And it was very special for me to learn Mishnayot because I'll just do a little show and tell. These miniature Mishnayot were my grandfather's, Professor Sarna, and you can tell, he took them with him everywhere. My father talks about his father was British, so he didn't know from baseball, but he felt that as a parent of American boys, he should bring his sons to baseball games. So he would bring my father and my uncle to baseball games, and he would sit there learning mishnayot. And my grandfather also, that he really believed in Mishnah study because my father and my uncle earned their allowance by not just learning Mishnayot, but reciting them by heart to Professor Lieberman. So that was my father's childhood and the familial love of Mishnah study that I hope to bring to this very challenging Masechet. So when Daf Yomi just recently learned Nashim, and when they switched from Moed to Nashim, everyone was like, "Oh wow, Yevamot is so hard." And then you go from Yevamot to Ketubot, and you're like, "Wow, do I miss Yevamot?" And I think people are gonna feel that, especially going from the material that Rabbi Silber was just talking about, and that the Masechet ends with things about agunot and things about chalitza, to now turn to the opening material of Masechet Ketubot, which is Ta'anat Betulim, which is a husband who has sex with his wife for the first time and claims that she is not a virgin. And that's our first chapter. And what I would say is that Torah this too is part of the Torah, and we learn it and we find ways to connect to it as best as we possibly can, even with some of these premises that are very, very difficult. The idea that women's bodies change after they have sex for the first time is quite disputed. Today, the idea that the hymen is a body part even is not really agreed upon by anyone anymore. The idea that women change in their value, that women are 50% less valuable once they've had sex for the first time. That's a very, very difficult idea. And one that our Masechet takes quite seriously. The idea that women have monetary value altogether is very difficult. And to that, I would say, I think there is an easy way to understand that, which is to say, in the conception of the Gemara, all people have monetary value. So if I were to, let's say, punch Debbie in the face, sorry, Debbie, right, and I would cause her some kind of damage. So one of the ways that we would calculate that damage is if I tried to sell Debbie on the slave market before I punched her in the face, and how much would she have been worth then versus how much would she be worth now. That's one way to establish the value of the person. The Torah also has a concept called archaot, erchin, which we'll get to much later in our study of Mishnah. Erchin, sorry, archaot is a different thing. And erchin are just like pegged values of people, and in the Gemara and Mishnah there, we kind of debate, is there really a set value to people, or is it actually variable depending on the market and all kinds of things like that? But right, the Gemara in general, all people seem to have monetary values assigned to them in Jewish law, so it's not unique to women. At least we can say that, even if the whole idea that people have monetary worth is extremely complicated in our kind of post-slavery, thank God, perspective today. So with all of that, by way of introduction to how difficult the first set of mishnayot and ketubot are, and we do get to some very beautiful things and also a lot of really complicated things through Masechet Ketubot. I would say, a lot of it is very real. The idea that women are worth less at various times in their lives. I think women really experience that, whether it's good or not. And like the Torah is real. Like I think that's something we love talking about at Drisha. I don't know, Rabbi Silber, you can back me up or not here, but I think we
do.
Like the Torah is about real life, and with all the complexities and hardships of that, and I think Masechet Ketubot really reflects some of the trickiest and most difficult to understand and connect to, even if we see it in real life. It's the type of thing that makes us mad in real life, and it might make us mad in Masechet Ketubot as well. And I'm not, my plan is not to shy away from any of that and still to learn it and do it justice. And when there's really conceptually difficult mishnayot, to spend time in those concepts, and when there's beautiful mishnayot or beautiful prakim, to enjoy the beauty when we find it, and to try and excavate beauty even when it's difficult to find. I really, really believe in doing that with our texts, because the rabbis were brilliant and the Torah is amazing, and they put together brilliant texts even when they're difficult. So that's my plan for our study of Masechet Ketubot. Today I want to do a bit of an introduction, aside from those other introductions I of course just did. But I think a very foundational question is, what is the origin of ketubot? Where do I know I need a ketubah from? Is it deoraita? Is it written about in the Torah? Is it Rabbanan? Is it a rabbinic enactment? If it's a rabbinic enactment, how early of a rabbinic enactment is it? So we're gonna not start with mishnayot, but we're actually gonna start in the Psukim and in the Mechilta, and then we'll look at the Gemara, and then we'll look at the Gemara disagreeing with the Mechilta, and then we're going to see the Ramban trying to make sense of the Psukim that the Mechilta was about, in line with the Gemara, and then we're going to look at a Gemara about Shimon ben Shetach, and then we're going to close. So that's where we're going. I'm going to share my screen. So that
can I say, Leah? Can I just add one thing that
please?
In our study of, just briefly, in the study of Yevamot, came up with a Yibum, that Yibum is not just a marriage, there's also all kinds of financial sides to Yibum. And I said, when we get to Masechet Ketubot, that's one of the themes that will come up, and with you study with Leah, then we'll come up, that's pretty central.
That's the whole thing, yeah. Yes, and let's say, like, when I do a wedding, what I always say about the ketubah is that love that isn't backed up by practicality and caretaking isn't really love, and the ketubah is all about practicality and caretaking, and we're actually going to see that. We're going to see that right away. So I was exactly headed in that direction, and we're going to see that in the Shimon ben Shetach source at the end here. And I do think that's a very important perspective to bring into any study of Masechet Ketubot, which is that on the one hand, we're like, oh, people don't have worth necessarily, but it requires money to take care of people. And that is extremely important. Okay, so here we go. So one potential source, the Mechilta's understanding of the source for the ketubah is from Exodus 22. Here we'll read it. V'chiyaf atah ish betula asher lo orasa v'shachav ima mohar yimaharena lo leisha. If a man seduces a virgin for whom the bride price has not been paid, and he lies with her, he must make her his wife by payment of a bride price. So a woman who is not yet, and maybe today we would call it like betrothed or engaged, let's say, and a man seduces this woman and has sex with her outside of like a formal agreement and payment and all of that. He needs to make her his wife through this payment. And then but if the woman's father says, absolutely not, I never approved of this marriage and I don't approve of it now and I'm not moving forward with it, then kasef yishkol kamor betulot. So then the seducer has to pay in accordance with the bride price for virgin. So a way to understand that would be, okay, like now this girl is going to go into the marriage market as a non-virgin. She's going to like bring in less, or she's worth less or something in that direction. So he has to pay the difference. The seducer has to pay the difference. So what is this? We've been throwing around with like, we just used the word mohar 3 different times, right? Mahorim harena lo leisha, and then also kemohar betulot. So what is this word? And your answer to that question is gonna determine a lot of things. So the mechilta is gonna come here and say ein mohar ela ketuba. What is a mohar? A mohar is a ketuba. It's a kind of complicated read of the second of 2216 because he's giving her ketubah, but he's not marrying her. So I think the way to sort of make sense of that would be to say he pays her what the ketubah would force him to pay, and you essentially consider it like a divorce or something like that in the Mechilta's eyes. But in the first pasuk, it's straightforward, right? He writes her a ketubah, and now they're married. And where do they bring the proof from? They bring the proof from the story of Dinah. Shamar, Herbualai Ma'od Mohar Umatan Ve'etna Ka'asher Tomaru Eli. Right, they go to Yaakov and they say, like, we'll pay whatever, like he wants to marry her, we'll pay whatever price there is. And so the understanding is like, yeah, we'll write a ketubah. That's the way the Mechilta reads it into the Dinah story, and then also into Shmot here. So that would be like, if you buy it, if you buy the Mechilta's read, then that would be, where do ketubot come from? The ketubah is assumed by the Torah, and it's commanded by the Torah, even for a person who didn't do it kind of in the right order. So theoretically, the correct order would be you make an arrangement, you do a betrothal, you write a ketubah, and then you have sex. In this case, in the Exodus 22 case, the seducer, he seduces her, they have sex, and then they have to do all the arranging afterwards, but that's still the same document, it's just kind of out of order. So I think that's how the Mechilta reads it here, and they say, and it would come to teach, it's a Torah level obligation, even when it's done out of order, and even if you skipped it, you have to still go back and do it. So that would be, I think that would be kind of the way to read Shmot Chaf Bet into the through the lens of the Mechilta. We have 2 other potential understandings of where the ketubah comes from. So here we have from these are both from various places in Masechet Ketubot, and a lot of this language actually appears like many times in the Gemara and Masechet Ketubot. It's almost as if the Gemara and Masechet Ketubot is like almost self-aware that the origin of the ketubah is complicated in some way. Anyway, so these are just 2 examples, but you can, if you learn in Daf Yomi or B'kiyas Masechet Ketubot, you'll see this type of thing comes up more frequently than you would imagine. So Ketubot 10a, we have a Breita, and this is in the middle of like a larger conversation that's going on, but we're just going to focus on this Breita for a second. Kasef Yishkol Kemohar HaBetulot, right? That's our pasuk here. Oh, don't want to do that. Okay, that's our pasuk here. Sheyehazah kemohar betulot umohar betulot kazah. So the Torah establishes that the fine, and in the case of the seducer whose father refuses, will be like the dowry of a virgin. The dowry of a virgin will be like this, right? And then there's a whole monetary discussion. And then the Gemara says, Mikan samchu chachamim. liktubat isha min haTorah. From here, the sages based their determination that a woman's marriage contract is an obligation by Torah law. So what does that sentence mean? Mikan samchu chachamim liktubat isha min haTorah. You could say, yeah, it's a Torah level obligation, and the rabbis learn it out from here. That would be to read the Gemara in line with the Mechilta. Another way to read the Gemara would be to say that the rabbis created the Ketubah and they found an asmachta, like a hook to attach it to the Torah. And asmachta are really good. They help you to, in a world where the Torah by heart, right? So in a world where you're always trying to remember rabbinic laws, asmachtas are important. They help you remember. They add strength, right? If something has an asmachta, that's like a really kind of a strong rabbinic law. But this sentence would then be to say, yeah, like we know we made this up, but we really want to make it so strong. So we created an asmachta into the Torah for it from this pasuk, and that would then be to own that yeah, this pasuk is probably talking about like a monetary sum, not actually a ketubah the way we imagine a ketubah, not a document, not an agreement, not a contract, just like an amount of money. That's not what a ketubah is, and we're gonna really see that that's not what a ketubah is going forward, in just a couple minutes. Anyways, so this, I think, ketubot tene, you could learn it two ways, as I've just tried to say. You could say, yep, it's a Torah level obligation, or you could say, no, it's a very strong rabbinic level obligation, and it's so strong that there's an asmachta, there's a hook, a connection, a tightening, maybe as a definition of asmachta almost, of the rabbinic law into the Torah. Okay. Now we're gonna see a full, a third possibility, which is that it's fully rabbinic. So this is from Ketubot 39b. Again, this is still this is an aside as part of a bigger argument that's going on. So just that's why you kind of feel like you're being plopped into the middle of a conversation. That's why you're feeling that way. But I just wanted to bring you this little piece. So Rabbanan Savre, the rabbis, in a bigger argument that's happening on Ketubot 39, they maintain Tama mai tkinu Rabbanan Ketubot. What's the reason that the sages instituted a marriage contract? Okay, so first of all, right, that question implies a lot. That question implies, oh, the rabbis invented the ketubah, right? Tama mai tkinu Rabbanan ketubah. That question implies Rabbanan hitkinu the ketubah, right? That question implies that the rabbis established the ketubah, and so, right, you're asking, why did the rabbis establish the ketubah? Kedei shelo teheh kala be'einav lahotziah, so that a Jewish woman would not be inconsequential in the eyes of her husband. She shouldn't just be easy for him to kick to the door. V'halo mate mafiklad, right? So he can't just release her. There's a lot. They add in a lot into the English here, but we're gonna not get into the whole all the details of what's being discussed. But just so now you've seen, right? The Mechilta would say, what is the status, who invented the ketubah? The ketubah is a Torah level obligation. Ketubot 10a says it's an asmachta, and Ketubot 39b just says the rabbis invented it, and here's why. It's so that so that Jewish women, it should be difficult to divorce Jewish women. So all of those are potential options. We have strong sources to all of them. The Gemara kind of plays around with all of them and lets them all stand. But the bottom line is that even if ketubot are a rabbinic innovation, they're one that is taken extremely seriously, and it's a very, very old innovation. And we're going to see that in Ketubot 82b in a second. But before we get there, you have to ask yourself, if you're in the world of Ketubot 39b and you're like, yeah, it's a totally rabbinic innovation, then what do you do with our psukim up here? How do you understand Exodus 22? So I kind of suggested this already, that Exodus 22, anytime it says mohar, just understand that to be a pile of cash, and then you can make sense of it. You don't have to buy ein mohar el ketubah. You don't have to buy that mohar is always necessarily a ketubah. And the Ramban, this is part of a much longer Ramban, and he really goes to town on it. So definitely feel free to check that out. But the Ramban says, yeah, the Ketubah is Midivrei Sofrim, the Ketubah is rabbinic. And so what do we do with mohar? Oh, mohar is our gifts, right? So about Perush mohar, hashluchim shadam shalech larusato. So what are mohar? Mohar are the gifts that a man sends to his betrothed, clay kasaf, zahav, gadim, letzarchei chupav, and nisuim. What maybe like jewels of silver and gold and clothes for the wedding ceremony and marriage. They're just gifts. And they're called in rabbinic Hebrew, they're called sivlonot. And those are it's those are a nice thing to do. And if you seduce someone and she slept with you and then you never sent her any presents, you're supposed to have sent her presents and you have to send them afterwards. Like that's, I think, more or less the Ramban's read of this. And then he gives a whole etymology for it from Shmuel Aleph. And the part of this that I didn't bring in because he doesn't say it like concisely enough that I could cut it in, but he says the Ramban brings this amazing question onto the proof text from the Mechilta, where, right, so here it says, impose upon me as much mohar and dower and I will give it to you. Like what would it mean? Like as much ketubah as you want. The Ramban, I mean, it's very easy to argue back to the Ramban here in this case, but he's like, what does it mean as much ketubah? Like there's only one ketubah. You're not sending multiple ketubah. And the obvious response to the Ramban, which is part of why I didn't bring it to you, because I wasn't so convinced by that piece of the Ramban, is like, well, you just raise the price of the ketubah. Which we'll see discussions of in the mishnah Yomit as we get to them. But anyway, so he really goes to town on this. And then he brings this whole etymology that mohar comes from like maher. It's stuff you send in advance, and then that was missing in the case of the seducer and the whole thing. Okay, fine. I was rushing a little bit now because I really want us to spend some time in Ketubot payback. So that's how, if you were wondering, right? Oh, if you don't read that mohar is ketubah, how do you make sense of the passages in the Torah about the seducer? Well, you can understand the mohar to basically just be gifts that you didn't send, or an amount of money that needs to have changed hands that didn't change hands, and that was missed. So you don't necessarily need to read the ketubah into the Torah. You can understand that the ketubah is a rabbinic innovation. But like rabbinic innovations are not all created equal. And the ketubah is like like A+ gold standard of rabbinic innovation, if it even is one. And I think that exact blurriness of, well, is it in the Torah? Is it in a smachta? Is it rabbinic? I want us to hold that blurriness as we go forward, because what we're about to see here is that it's a quite early, if it's a rabbinic innovation, it's a quite early one. If it's not a rabbinic innovation, it's a Torah idea that the rabbis use some trial and error on before settling on how to do it right in order to best protect Jewish women. And this is really where I said on Rabbi Silber's point before that like money is a really important part of any marriage. Any couple that says, oh, we want to get married, well, have you talked about your finances? No, it'll work itself out. The Jewish tradition says like a hard no to that. It will not work itself out. It must be discussed and planned in advance. And the ketubah is part of that. The ketubah is part of the financial negotiations of a marriage, all oriented around providing protection to Jewish women. Now, you might say, wow, that's so nice. We have this rabbinic innovation that provides protection to women. You might also say, do women need protection? Like what, women are strong and capable. They're just as strong and capable as anyone else. They need protection only in the ways that any other human being needs protection. Also, so that's part one. Part two is, what, only married women deserve financial safety and protection? Like all people deserve. Okay, so all I'm saying is, yes, like there's many critiques that one could level against this. And the idea that we're about to read about Shimon ben Shattach, he lived in the time of the Hasmoneans. So we're talking about before the Common Era. There was there was attempt after attempt to maximally keep Jewish women safe within their marriages. That's pretty cool. Like that's, we're not talking about an idea that's happening today. We're talking about something that happened more than 2,000 years ago as a massive attempt to keep Jewish women safe, and then became required. And if it was a rabbinic innovation, they tried to make it as close as possible to a Torah level requirement to help people take it as seriously as possible. And if it's a Torah level obligation, then the rabbis are trying to mold the Torah level obligation to best protect Jewish women. And I think at the end of the day, I would say at least that I find that beautiful and inspiring. And that it's our job, even today, to say all members of our community, no matter how vulnerable they are, we need to work to protect them. And this type of work that we're about to see happen from so very long ago is exactly the type of work that we're all still trying to do in order to protect members of our community that are vulnerable. And we can be inspired in that way. Okay. So here's this Gemara that I've been giving a lot of introduction to that now we're going to look at in 4 minutes. Okay, so the Gemara brings a Breita. So originally they wrote for a virgin 200 dinar and for a widow 100 dinar. But since women were concerned that their contract money would be wasted or lost, they had no guarantee that it would ever be connected. So, and men would grow old and they wouldn't be able to get married because women didn't feel safe about it. They would prefer to stay in their father's homes than get married necessarily. There's a few different ways to understand what's happening, but basically they say originally you have a ketubah for this much money, and you would write the ketubah, but ultimately it didn't really protect women, and it so much didn't protect women that women were even refusing to get married, or let's say it like that, or fathers were refusing to marry off their daughters. Maybe that's hard to say exactly what's happening here. And so then they say, okay, okay, so they were concerned, right, that the money wouldn't be there at the end when the divorce would come or when their husband would die. So then they say, okay, you're going to put the money up front. You want to get married? Great, you're going to put the money, however much it is, 100 dinar, 200 dinar, you're going to put it in her father's house. It's just going to be sitting there in the corner. They're locking it into the safe. The money is sitting there. It's for sure there. You can feel confident. Go get married. But then what happened? When a woman's husband would get mad at her, he would say, go, your ketubah's sitting there. I don't want to be married to you anymore. Go take it. Get out of my life. And so it actually, instead of it being vulnerable, you'll die and there won't be any money left, now they're vulnerable that they could just be divorced at any time. That divorce would be too easy because the money is just actually sitting there. And so then they did a third innovation. I guess this is innovation number 2, right? So then they said, okay, the sum of money will be sitting there, but it would be placed in the husband's house, in her father-in-law's house. Ashirot osodot ha'klatot shel kasef v'zahav, aniot hayu osodot ha'avit shel meimei raglayim. And wealthy women would craft their marriage contract money into baskets of silver and gold. Poor ones would craft it into a vessel for the collection of urine, i.e. this small little thing that is extremely practical. But the bottom line is no matter how much money it was still collected and sitting there. So whenever the husband would get mad at her, when he would get mad at her, he would say to her, take your ketubah and go. Ad Sheba Shimon ben Shattach. So we've now seen 3 iterations of the ketubah before Shimon ben Shattach, who lives in the time of King Yanai. Who exactly King Yanai is, how he maps onto history, not 100% clear, but Shimon ben Shattach's sister is supposedly married to him. And anyways, he when the Hasmoneans kind of turned on the rabbis, he's spared. That's the whole story. And he and anyways, very, very early, one of the Zugot, Shimon ben Shattach now is making the last innovation that still stands today, and he established all my property is guaranteed for her marriage contract. So the exact details of that we're going to see in the Masechet, by this idea that there actually is not a pile of gold sitting there, oh, take it whenever, but there's also like no guarantee that she'll ever be able to collect. So in order to resolve both of those problems, Shimon ben Shattach created the ketubah that's still in use today, which is all my property. You might have been at a wedding where someone pointed out, like, even the shirt off my back, right, is guaranteed towards the marriage contract. So it's not so easy for him to just be like, take your ketubah and go. But on the other hand, she can feel assured that her ketubah will be there for her when she wants to collect it. And we will see more of that in Masechet Ketubot starting this week. So hopefully, I think it's complicated to go into a Masechet being like, wait, if you left this being like, I don't understand, is it Rabbanan? Is it D'Oraita? Yeah, I think I think we are confused about that. You saw the Ramban be like, it's for sure D'Rabbanan. That's the preponderance of the medieval commentators believe it to be D'Rabbanan, but it's like, as I said before, A+, gold star D'Rabbanan, like very, very serious, very, very ancient, so ancient that it had gone through many iterations before the Hasmonean period. That's a very, very, very old D'Rabbanan, and a very serious one. And what I would say going into Masechet Ketubot, and I said before, Masechet Ketubot has a difficult opening, but if we go in with a lens of this was a very, very ancient attempt by the rabbis to protect some of the most vulnerable people in society, i.e. women, then hopefully those glasses can help us stay charitable in our reading and interpretation of this Masechet, and that is very much my hope and plan. Just in terms of scheduling, this class is going to actually meet on Tuesday nights. I have small children, so Sunday afternoons are a very challenging time for me. I'm so sorry about the schedule change, but hopefully many of you will keep learning with us, and I'm really, really looking forward to doing this together. I don't know if Rabbi Silber, you want to say just a final word?
No, I mean, yeah, I think it's a great Masechta. Ketubot, the Masechet Ketubot, the Mishnah is really a springboard, but it's called the key to Shas, because Ketubot has in it, everything's in it. I mean, it's called the key to Shas. And so it's a great opportunity to continue. And the deeper you get into the Mishnah, Ketubot is an amazing Masechta, but the more you do of it, so it sort of gets to you when you really want to continue. And the goal would be to really complete, hopefully, the whole state of Nashim and continue, and maybe all of as Rabbanit Leah said, to complete really all the Mishnah. It really is a gateway to, and opens up your eyes to a lot of things, some of which are difficult to deal with, but that's life, you know what I mean? Or it's a better understanding of the whole tradition, Tarsha Baal Peh, which is really very central to us. So wishing you all well, and I hope you can all make the class and tell others about it. Tuesday, what time on Tuesday is the class?
8:00, but it's not this Tuesday, because you won't have learned any Ketubot by then. So next Tuesday. Next Tuesday, start.
Yep. So next Tuesday at 8 p.m. The link, if you have not signed up for this and you would like to join in, I've posted the link for signups in chat.